we have a crisis of capacity. You rightfully highlighted that we have an increasing number of people who need services, but frankly, we're not providing them. But let's start off with any good department that intends to meet the needs of people in the state does good planning. Can you tell me why no 507 plan has been filed for OPWDD since 2012? When do we expect to get the next OPWDD 507 plan, a 5-year plan?
There will be an OPWDD 507 plan filed this year.
Filed this year, thank you. And
Right.
what about the autism study? In 2018, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill. It was A261 at the time that said that said we needed a study to determine what the needs of people with autism are and what it would cost the state of New York to meet those needs. When do we expect we'll get that study?
That study will be completed this year also.
Thank you. Now, I'm a little concerned about the commitment of the state to people with special needs. I'm looking, in 2014, the state, all funds, spent $4.7 billion. You are proposing here a $4.9 billion budget, which is a $60 million decrease from last year. What kind of a commitment? How are you going to meet all those needs if we have all of these people seeking more and more these services, and yet there's going to be a decrease, and it's virtually the same as it was 7 years ago. And if we take a look, this is also affecting our voluntary agencies. If you look at the actual aid to localities in 2019, it was $3.2 billion. But in 2020, it was only $1.9 billion. And now you're projecting for 2021 about $3 billion. With all of the increased needs, first of all, what happened in 2020? Why did we spend so little? How much is outstanding to the providers and people with disabilities? How much do we owe?
Assemblyman, I must apologize. Can you run the?
Sure. 2019 was 3.2 billion. 2020 was 1.9 billion. Is projected for the next few months. And 2021, you're asking for 3 billion in aid to localities.
Well, our local assistance payments are much smaller than that. They're on the order of $300 to $400 million per year. I apologize. I don't know where you got these numbers.
These are actual disbursements. They're published numbers.
For OPWDD?
Yes. All right. Let me ask you, how much of the monies that you spent this year are accounted for in the rollover from the Medicaid of last year? What percentage of your expenditures were actually for last year's bills?
We don't have a rollover. We operate on a cash basis. Our providers have a period of about 3 months to submit.
No, Commissioner, at the end of the quarter of last year, the governor withheld payments on Medicaid, and he rolled them over into this year. It was something like $1 billion of the last quarter that got rolled over. You're not familiar with that?
No, that was not something that had an impact on OPWDD.
Well, your department has Medicaid. All of the people who get your services must be on Medicaid, correct?
It's not necessarily. We have a small number of individuals who we can support.
Okay, almost all.
That's fair enough, sure.
So you're not affected by a rollover of Medicaid from last year?
We have a fiscal plan with a target, and we operate on a cash basis. We spend to
any of the money that came from COVID relief, did any of that go to the voluntary agencies like it did in other states?
The New York State Division of the Budget manages the receipt of COVID relief funds.
Right. So you're not aware of any money having passed through your department going to the voluntary agencies, correct?
The monies that are used by DOB, received by from the federal government by DOB, are used to support all programs.
Okay. Now, Commissioner,
not passed through. They're used to.
That there is a very significant waiting list just to get processed for eligibility for services. How long is that waiting list? Do you know?
We have a process of called the front door, which supports.
How many people have gone through the front door and are still waiting to be processed?
I don't know that I fully understand the question, but
in the lower Hudson Valley, I am aware of several hundred people on a waiting list just to get approved for eligibility. So what is it statewide?
There is a process with people who
So you don't know the
engaged
number.
in determining their eligibility.
Commissioner, you're not aware of the number. You just tell me there's a process.
Yeah, and I think, it sometimes means they've got to come back and collect information about.
I'm very concerned about on March 31 of 2010, OPWDD had 21,500 employees. You are proposing in your budget that on March 31, 2022, there'll be 18,600 employees. That's almost 3,000 employees fewer than you had in 2010. Could that be why we have such waiting lists and why people can't get declared eligible for services?
We process every application for every individual who applies for services. Sometimes,
Eventually.
No, there's a process, and sometimes it's a lengthy one because reports, assessments, and other types of material need to be collected.
Right now, somebody in Westchester County who's going into the system for the first time must go through an entire process with about 7 steps, maybe 8 steps, and it takes 2 years. Are you aware of that?
I can't speak to the length of time for any specific individual.
Well, Commissioner, I would ask that you maybe look into it. Now, you're talking about money for minimum wage. Is there any new money in your budget to pay for minimum wage? My understanding is you're actually proposing that we defer the cost of living for DSPs so that we could pay for the minimum wage. Is that correct?
No, there is an appropriation of $32 million state share, which when
but you are also proposing we defer the cost of living increases, the COLAs, correct?
There's no cost of living increase in the budget.
Right. So we're deferring what was supposed to be a COLA, and we're instead going to get a new headline that says we're going to meet the minimum wage, correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't comment on.
Okay. Now, part of your system in July of 2018, the governor, your department, created this system of care coordination organizations, July of 2018. For the first 2 years, it was paid for 90% by FMAP funds, federal Medicaid funds. As soon as it became a state 50-50 match, last year, July 2020, you imposed a 16% rate cut, correct? $73 million savings. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, now you're proposing for this May, another 23% rate cut. Is that true? Another $93 million, quote, savings.
There is a rate cut of approximately $53 million. There's also a withhold of approximately $40 million.
So what we're saying here then is that you're basically going to cut almost 40% of the rate for the entry level for anybody going into OPWDD. Before they get anywhere near OPWDD, they need to have a care coordinator. And now we're going to cut the rate that we pay care coordinators 40%. Is that what you're saying?
No, as you mentioned, this is a new program that launched in 2018. Prior to July of 2018, we contracted with approximately 350 agency called Medicaid.
Yeah, now we have 7 statewide agencies with about 3,000 people handling all of the people who want to get into the system or are already in the system. These people do a huge amount of work, and yet we're going to cut them 40%. Is that correct?
Well, I think the context in understanding the targeted reduction is that we increased spending on care coordination by 60% between this MSC program and the CCO program on July 1st of 2018. Our total
because you put it into effect then.
Coordination.
Now, everybody who wants to get into the system has to have a care coordinator. Is that correct? Are you aware that there are not enough care coordinators and there are not enough fiscal intermediaries and there are not enough any of the people that you've set up? You've got like an 8-step process before anybody can get any services, and now you're not paying them enough, and there's not enough of them to handle all of the applications, Commissioner. I'd ask that you take a look at that and take another look at your budget.